All right, y'all. I think a couple more here, and then I'm about to kick things off. Another quick reminder for those of you just joining us, please keep your mics muted during our conversation so we can hear all of the lovely insights and wisdom from Val and our wonderful host. All right. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming to support. As you are all aware, the Hollins Alumni Relations team, as well as the Richmond Chapter, have done a little bit of a collab to put together a evening conversation with our lovely host, Sindhu Bloom, class of 93, who will be interviewing, questioning, interrogating, maybe even our lovely author, Val Abbott, who has a newly released book, Had a Pillow, which released on May 4th. I'll leave her to all of the lovely, intimate details of the book, the process, all of that, but we can go ahead and kick it off. I'll leave it to you guys.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'm Sindhu Bloom, class of 1993, and I am beyond delighted to be here tonight for a conversation with author and my friend, Valerie James Abbott, also class of 1993. For those of you who know Valerie, she is also a very good friend of Hollins. Over the years, she has tirelessly worked so hard for Hollins and her students through the Richmond Chapter. And for those of you who do not know Valerie, you are in for a really fun conversation. So we're here, of course, to talk about Valerie's just published children's book, Had a Pillow. To say that this book is a passion project for Val is an understatement. The story is based on her family's experience and journey dealing with her younger daughter's late onset hearing loss. And before we get into the questions, there's a really important matter that we need to deal with, as all of us for the past year have been in pandemic mode. Val has been invited to a gala in July, and not only has she been invited, she is a featured guest. So Val has a dilemma. There are two dresses that she's debating. So the first question is, let's say the dress on the left is dress A and the dress on the right is dress B. All right, so that's question one. So either put dress A or dress B in the chat for your vote. And the second question, heels or no heels? I don't know about anybody else on here who wears heels. Mine are all packed away. I haven't worn them in forever. So these are the issues that she's grappling with for the July gala. All right, so let's get into this. So Valerie, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the book and that journey and talking about late onset hearing loss, I want to talk about your career for a second. You graduated from Hollins in 1993 with a major in economics and international business.
Correct.
You went to Bank of America. Then you had a very successful painting business where all the painters were women.
Yes.
And then you've worked as a family coordinator for the hard of hearing, and then you've written this book. So how does that happen? How do you start from working at Bank of America and knowing that your life is going to be in finance to writing this book?
So I think that's one of the biggest things, is that I had no idea. I majored in economics at Hollins for one reason and one reason only, and that was so that I could definitely get a job that would pay enough that I didn't have to go back home and live at home. And so I thought economics was going to be my key to success, and it was. And I did go into banking pretty much right away, and spent 14 years at Bank of America. And it was when my second child, Bridget, was identified with hearing loss that I realized my corporate American life was not conducive. It was not going to work, especially because there were so many questions at the time. She was 2.5. How did this happen? Why did this happen? When did this happen? How did we miss it? Will it progress? Is it a progressive loss? It was already moderate sloping to severe, which made understanding and acquiring speech and language very difficult. And was I going to need to learn sign language? I mean, there were so many questions and no one really was giving us firm answers. So I resigned from Bank of America, and my good friend who also had worked at the bank for a while, she was starting a painting business, and we decided to go into it together, and we ended up establishing one of the most successful painting businesses in Central Virginia. And it was one of the only crews in the United States that was all women. And it's still going. I'm no longer a part owner of that, but I was in that for 7 years, and then took some time off and was introduced to the Center for Family Involvement at the Partnership for People with Disabilities. They were specifically looking to work with someone in Henrico County in Virginia who had a child with hearing loss. And someone caught wind that I was not employed at the time. And so I started volunteering for them, and that turned into a job. So how that came into a book was Patapilla was written 10, 12 years ago. It was originally written as a memoir, more, not even a memoir, but more of just like a very, very long journal entry. And I just wanted to get everything out of my brain. I wanted to look back at how much had just happened over the last year or two. And that's kind of how it started. And then over time, it really changed into the children's book that it is today. So I never had a plan to write a children's book. That would actually have been the last thing I would have imagined myself doing. But sometimes you find yourself doing things you didn't expect, and you get to decide, do I go after this? Do I follow this, or do I ignore it?
So I want to go back to one point really quickly, and that is your shift from Bank of America to the painting company. I'm sure unexpected, unanticipated, when you think about when you graduated from Hollins. And I think, over the years, not only have I discussed with you, but with so many other people, what happens when things don't go the way you thought they were going to go for a variety of reasons. And what is that experience like?
This is, a part of the journey that I don't talk about that often, because it seems kind of selfish, but I can talk about that here, is I really had some pretty big plans for myself, right? I really wanted to succeed in business. I wanted to succeed in banking. I was succeeding. I was working in a global department that was working on communications that went around the world, and handling a lot of money and budgets. And so when Bridget was diagnosed, and I realized something has to change in order for her to get the best possible success outcome, I had to decide to leave my professional career behind, and to not really know what that meant. Would I return to it? Would I not? Would I do something different? Would I not? At the time we were, we were a 2-income family. I needed to make some money. And that was where my friend Stacy said, gave me the opportunity to say, let's give this a go. And if it doesn't work out, we're still besties. And I said, okay. And so that allowed me to have the flexibility of working while she was in preschool, but she was going to speech therapy and auditory therapy 3 days a week in the middle of the day. And I didn't know how long that would go on. So there was a mourning period, both with having a child that was identified with a disability and not knowing what that meant, and then a grieving process of feeling like I'm so successful, I'm professionally successful, and I am terminating my success. And there are some emotions that went with that. It was a hard time. It was kind of having to admit to being sad about a lot of different things.
And sad about things that are yours and yours only, right?
Yeah.
So it seems selfish, but thank you for sharing that, because I think everybody goes through that, and it's really important to talk about. So you mentioned finding out about the diagnosis, and you talk about, writing this book originally as a memoir, or from that point of view. So talk about that a little bit more, and what at the time, when in your mind does it become this book?
Right. So when I wrote it originally, it was really just a very long journal entry type of thing. And I shared it with some immediate family, and they're like, oh my gosh, you could totally write a book. I was like, oh, I could write a book, not for the purpose of publishing it, but just like, hey, I could write a book. And so I started to write a book, and it was a children's book, and it was through my perspective. It was through mom's. And I was struggling with it. It just wasn't working. I was really tied to the idea that everything that I was putting in there had to be completely accurate. It was not going to be based on a true story. It was going to be a true story. And I don't know why I imposed that rule on myself, but I did. And I took some classes at the University of Richmond, and specifically on writing a book and publishing a book. And the professor there, who was wonderful, he said, I think you need to give yourself permission to stray a bit from the actual facts and to reconsider writing this for an audience and really create a story. And I was not comfortable with that advice. And then he said, I would even go so far as to perhaps not even narrate it, have someone else in the family narrate it. Now, that made me very uncomfortable. But I needed someone to actually give me that kind of feedback, unsolicited feedback, I guess, because I wrestled with that and then started writing it from the perspective of my oldest child, Mary Claire, and trying to imagine what would this have been like for her. She was very small at the time. She's 3 years older than Bridget. And so this gave me kind of permission to start over and, put the original in the trash and rewrite it. And it really felt right. It just felt better. It felt, and having permission to say, okay, so this thing that happened over here, we're going to move it over here. Yes, it makes it a book of fiction, but it is completely based on fact. And so it took me a while to admit that I was uncomfortable with that, but it makes for a hell of a better story.
Talk about getting outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
So I'd like you to read the introduction to the book, but before you do that, talk about what you want people to take away from this book, not just, kids, but the parents.
So one of the things that we struggled with in the beginning, when Bridie, we realized, oh my gosh, she has lost a large percentage of her hearing. We don't know if it's going to progress. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know how we're supposed to be feeling. We didn't really have a place to validate that. We didn't have anybody to say, what you're doing in private, what you're saying to yourself, all of that is normal. All of that is completely okay and part of this journey. And so what I'm hoping is that parents who, yes, it's a children's book, but it's the parents when they're reading it for them to go, oh my gosh, she did that too. Oh my gosh, she said that too. The internal dialogue that they recognize, oh, that's part of this and it's okay. That's really the biggest piece of this, is so that parents can get past that grieving part and that guilt and guilty for feeling this way. And the book is intended to help them when maybe there's no other place for that to happen.
And you've got resources in the book, and what a wonderful gift to give to people, that sense of it's not just me and I'm not alone in this.
Yeah. So the end, this was very intentional. The very end of the book, there's 2 pages, and it's a very long, comprehensive list of national organizations and agencies that are dedicated to helping families of children with hearing loss. And so when a family gets this, especially if they're relatively new to the journey, that this is waiting for them when they're ready. And they can start exploring. I mean, yes, we all Google search, all of us do it. But for them to have a written down list already there for them to say, oh, okay, these are the legitimate places.
And with that, could you read the introduction for us?
Sure. I would love to read the introduction. I don't know that
And just a quick reminder for everybody to be on mute. And while you're reading, I'm going to put myself on mute too.
In the United States, it is estimated that as many as 3 in 1,000 babies are born deaf or hard of hearing. Late onset or progressive hearing loss can also develop later on during early childhood. Children with undiagnosed or untreated hearing loss often struggle with important developmental milestones. Many of these children are at risk of falling behind in language acquisition, cognitive development, social and emotional well-being, and success in the classroom. Our daughter Bridget passed her newborn hearing screen at the hospital when she was born. At first, she could hear. Then it changed. We didn't notice. Her hearing loss was not detected until her verbal skills became significantly delayed, and we slowly began to admit that something wasn't right. Patapillow is based on the true story of how our family discovered and came to terms with the mystery of Bridget's hearing loss as told through the lens of her older sister, Mary Claire. In the years that followed her diagnosis, we met many families who had responded to their child's disability just as we had, shocked, worried, and struggling. We each searched for answers, advice, information, and support. This book was written with the intention of being one of many resources, but more importantly, it was written as a gift of hope for families who are just beginning their journey. Because next to love, hope is the most powerful fuel of the human spirit.
Okay, there's no need to make people cry.
There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
That is lovely. Thank you. And with that, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of your writing career. So how long did it take you to write this book, all told?
My answer to that is I started 12 years ago, which is true. It went through so many phases and parts, and it was edited and then sat and then edited and then sat and went to a couple of large publishing houses where I was shocked that they sent it back with feedback. Like, have you considered this? Which is unheard of from what people tell me. Or publishing houses saying, this is terrific. It's not our wheelhouse, try over here. So it's really, really hard for me to come up with a time. How long did it take? It's more, how long did it take till Patapillow found its right home and was published? And that's 12 years.
So talk about that right home. How did you finally land? How did that eventually work out?
With the publisher?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, when I first kind of finalized the manuscript as it more or less is now, and there were other authors, published authors that said, it's ready, go. And I went through the process of sending it out to some large publishing houses. And this was really like before email. I mean, yes, some people used it, but that was not the way the publishing houses were using it. And so it was all done by mail. And so after, those rejection letters came back, I should mention that I was never upset when I got a rejection letter. I was actually excited because it showed that it's working. Like the people told me, if I do this, then this will happen, and they'll send it back, and there'll be a form letter on top, and then all of them were coming back. So that told me, okay, I'm doing it right. And then it sat in the drawer for a long time because I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to put it in the drawer and I'll pull it out in a couple months. Well, a couple months was like 6 or 7 years. It was a long time. And last summer during COVID, my painting partner, Stacy, my BFF still, sorry, Sindhu, I have a lot.
I was going to say.
I know, I'm sorry. So she called me and she said, stop what you're doing. I don't know where you are. Pull over if you're driving. You must call this woman named Kim. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, your book, Patapillow. Because when you're painting with somebody, you spend a lot of time talking about every single aspect of your life. So she knew every single thing related to Patapillow, more than me, actually, probably because I talked about it nonstop. And she said, this woman is the publisher. She's the place. I know it. You need to call her. And I was like, okay. And so I called Kim Ely with Kiwi Publishing. And I was reluctant. I started the conversation like, my friend Stacy told me to call you. I'm supposed to call. And when I got off the phone with her, I knew, oh my God, Patapillow is going to be published during COVID. This is actually going to happen. This is someone who can make it happen. And not just make it happen, but make it successful. And so we had a couple of meetings after that. And I said, before we do anything, before anything gets signed, before we do anything else, because I didn't have an illustrator, didn't have a graphic designer, didn't have, there's tons of pieces and parts to this process. I said, this has to be published in May. And she said, why? And I said, because May is Better Hearing and Speech Month. And in this planet where I live with all of these, this is a big, big, big deal. It's kind of like, you know, it's like all the other campaigns have their big month. Well, hearing loss in children, this is the month, May. And so she said, okay, well, let's figure this out. And so we mapped it out on a big calendar. And she said, if we can get an illustrator that will commit to getting the artwork done, and if we can get the graphic designer and all of this. And so she was really like the general contractor who got all the right people to do all the right things and agree to all the right timeframes. And it was like this from August 1st, when we said, okay, we're going to do this. We still didn't have an illustrator at that point. She got all the right players together, and it was like this. I mean, nonstop from September 1st all the way through February 1st. It was wild. You know, you can hear it in my voice. It was a very stressful time, and I cried a lot. And Kim told me it was okay to cry.
I love it. I love it. And you know, my next question is going to be about your relationship with your illustrator. I don't know why. I mean, you and I have talked about this a bunch of times. I find this relationship absolutely fascinating because it's your words and someone else is turning it into pictures. Yeah. So talk about that collaboration.
Yeah. So I didn't have an illustrator. I had a vision for the type of artwork that I favored, which was watercolor illustrations. And I don't know why, I just imagined that this would eventually be illustrated in watercolors. And so we went on an international search, and I came across an illustrator that I absolutely loved her work. And I said, and it wasn't a huge portfolio either. It was a smaller portfolio, but it was exactly what I wanted. And I said, I think that's a good, we should start there. And so Kim and I interviewed her, and she said, okay, you know, I can agree to the timeline. That was another big one, was, can you agree to the timeline? And come to find out, she was born and raised on Long Island, and she lives in Richmond on the other side of the river.
Yes. And you were born and raised.
Mary D's like, what? Yes, I kid you not. And I have never met her face to face yet because of COVID. We have done everything like this. And we've dropped things off, like where, you know, she had big artwork for me to see and stuff. And so I go in and so I will meet her for the first time on Tuesday at the book launch event that we're doing at Terrence West. So anybody wants to go, we still have a couple tickets. You want to see a reunion? I mean, it's going to be kind of fun. So.
So was there a lot of back and forth in terms of the images and how they evolved?
Yes. There's a lot about illustrations that I've learned.
Tell us.
And there's stages. It goes from like rough sketches to a little bit more detailed sketches to color roughs to finals to, and you kind of can't make a big change once you're over here. You kind of have to do it over here. And so the way that we figured would be the fastest and most effective way to work was that she would do them in like groups of 3 or 4, because there are 17 illustrations. And so she would do them in groups of 3 or 4 and then send them to me. And then I would have 48 hours to review them. And then she would be working on the rest. So it was this constant movement. So, and that was done with everything. So for 17 illustrations, we had the sketches, and then we had the more detailed sketches. And then if there was a change, then it was like, okay. And then you go back, and then the color roughs, but wait, okay, go back. And then the finals, right? And it was like, I had 48 hours. I agreed to 48 hours to review, and any changes or edits or whatever I wanted, I would get them back to her so we could keep our time frame. That was from September through like the middle of January, was like that.
Wow, okay. It sounds a little intense.
It was. That's why I cried.
And had the space in which to do it. Now, throughout this whole thing, starting last summer until now, what have you learned about yourself? Something new.
Something new. Well, I really have fallen in love with Prosecco. I never drank Prosecco before this, like ever. And now it's my go-to. But I also am really impressed with really handing things over to other people and trusting that it's going to happen with total strangers, people I don't know, and admitting when I was worried, you know, and that was a big part of what Kim, my publisher, was when I would panic. And she would say, let's talk about it. And I would, you know, and this could be at any time. I was able to call her literally any time of day. And so I would call and say, I'm really anxious about whatever. And she would say, tell me more about that. I said, okay. And she said, so I'm going to tell you that this is not going to happen, or this is going to happen. And so you can continue to panic. That is totally fine. But I've got this. So you get to decide, like, do you want to, you know, or do you, and so it was a really great relationship with the publisher for me to be able to not go to the illustrator and say, I'm worried you're one day late. I mean, think about that, right? And instead I go to my publisher and say, I'm worried she's not going to return it. Say, I hear you. You can worry about that, but I got it. And so I learned that sometimes you just have to have faith. And you have to trust when there's no reason in the world, because you have no history with the person.
And I love that, because the more you let go, you know, the easier it gets and the better you are at doing what you're doing, because you can worry about other things and not worry about the things that are not in your control.
Yeah.
It's a really liberating feeling. And I too have experienced it recently. So what are your future plans for writing? Well, I mean, when's the next book coming out? Has anyone asked you that?
Everyone asks, when is your next book coming out? So I don't have a next book coming out. I'm just barely published this one, people. I mean, come on. I suspect that the next book that I will publish, and you're the first to hear it, is I'm getting a lot of inquiries about making Patapillo in Spanish.
Ooh.
And there are so few books, so few books for the Spanish speaking community. And it's a growing community in the United States. And hearing loss is just as prevalent in those communities. But it's a different experience for them, because you have children who are trying to become bilingual, and so they do have a longer time before identification. That's data we know. So if I'm going to write another book, the next one I really think will be this one in Spanish, since I'm already getting professionals asking me, how fast can you turn that around? I'm like, this just got published on May 4th. And so that's where I am. I never intended to be an author of multiple things. I never even thought I would be an author of one thing. But if I can do something that benefits families of children with hearing loss and helping them kind of get the strength and the courage to keep, to go and do what they need to do on behalf of their children, the Spanish speaking community needs that just as much as any other community. So that seems like the most logical thing and responsible thing for me to do.
What is your advice for aspiring writers or those who wish to also publish?
So if it's young people, like really young people, there's a lot to be learned by just life. A lot of wisdom and vocabulary and things that come with just going through life. And so if your writing doesn't turn into something that's a big thing right away, you have lots of time to gain that wisdom and to become a better writer. So don't stop writing, but actually see it as a gift that you're being given more time to hone your craft and to become wiser. For anyone who is not a young person, and we can self-identify as whether we're old or not. Don't wait. Just write it. Just do it, and just do it for yourself. Most of my writing for many, many years, I was the only one who saw it. It was just for me. And so nobody judged it. Nobody talked about it. It was just for me. And I can't even tell you how many short reflections that I've written, a lot. Some of them I've made public over recent years, but many of them I haven't. And they're just about things that I've experienced or things that I've thought about or things that I've witnessed. So just write. And if you're serious about really wanting to publish your work, I've had 6 conversations with people in the last 4 weeks from various places saying, tell me how you did it. And it's a long conversation. So I'm happy to talk to anybody one-on-one about like the ins and outs of how I went about it. But, and it's a process. But in terms of writing a book or writing something, just write it.
So that's absolutely true. Even when you feel like you're blocked, even if you feel like you can't do it, just write. So before we get into the next set of questions, could you clarify for us what exactly late onset hearing loss is? Because that was an education for me.
Yes. So late onset hearing loss is defined, generally speaking, as when children are born with hearing and they lose it sometime between birth and 5 years of age. Those are kind of a loose definition. So it is hearing loss that happens after the child has been born, generally speaking, after they've passed the newborn hearing screen, which is now mandatory in every state in the United States, unless a parent declines it, which most don't. And just as many children acquire hearing loss, late onset hearing loss, as are born with it. But the time it takes to identify those children is much, much longer, because after a child passes their newborn hearing screen in the hospital, they're not required to be tested again until kindergarten, and that's public kindergarten. And so you have all this time where these children, some of them have lost their hearing for a wide variety of reasons. Cytomegalovirus is the biggest one right now. And we don't know. We don't notice until something big happens, whether it's, they're not talking at all, or they're talking nonstop, but we can't understand them, or they're acting very strange. They're doing strange things. And there's some strange things in the book that we talk about that we missed. And did we talk about what patapilla means?
We didn't, but can I want to bring that up, because you recently were interviewed for TV on TV.
I was on TV.
You were on TV. And by the way, Chris Abbott, I know you're here. Would you mind putting a link to that interview in the chat so everyone has it? It's a fantastic interview. But one of the things that I loved hearing about, not loved hearing about, but that I found so interesting was that Bridget was mispronouncing words. And that's all I'm going to say. And if you could talk about that and what went through your mind, and then patapilla.
Yes. So that was the clue. The clue that something was going on was that her language skills, her speech skills were far behind her peer group when she was 2.5. We didn't know that though, right? We didn't know. We didn't notice that. We just thought it was normal. And so it was her preschool teacher who actually said, "Are you concerned about her speech?" And we were like, "No." No. She said, "Do you find her hard to understand?" And I said, "Sure, but we understand her, we get it." And she said, "I think you should have her evaluated by early intervention," which we did. And that's where in that first visit to our home that we realized we were dealing with a hearing issue. And so patapillo was one of many, many, many words that Bridget invented for the words that she was acquiring, only she was acquiring them incorrectly. So patapillo means caterpillar. And again, lots and lots of words that were incorrect. The one that comes to mind is the mod in the pot. There's mod in the pot. There's a frog in the pond. There's a frog in the pond.
Yeah.
There's a mod in the pot. We had a pond in our backyard. And so there were there were certain words that she said perfectly, and there were certain words that were really distorted, and we didn't know like what was, what was correct and what wasn't. But what that did tell us, the professionals were able to determine that she probably lost her hearing around 18 months of age based on the words that she could say correctly. And those are the first words that a child kind of absorbs and keeps in their brain, and then they come out, versus the ones that were not, like you would not know caterpillar when you are 6 months old, but you would know mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, caterpillar.
So, from knowing you and knowing about the book and having heard the story over the years, you very much are still a family that just, you like swung into action, right? Or that's what I saw. And based on that, what advice would you give to parents in the early years of parenting, regardless of whatever they're dealing with? There may be a problem, there may be a big problem or a small problem, but what is your advice about survival at that point?
Right. Really, the goal is just to survive, is just to get from one day to the next. And one of the things that I think people, if we were to go back in time and see what did Val look like, what did she look like in month 2? What did she look like on May 20th of 2008, where we were about 6 weeks into this? I was a hot mess. I was a hot mess all the time, and I did not hide it. I was a hot mess in the grocery store. I was a hot mess when the early interventionist came to the house. The first time I actually, like, everything looked great and there were cookies and it was all planned. But the second visit, I was just a mess. And yet I didn't let the mess stop me from doing what we had to do for her, and or to stop me from still moving forward. I just allowed my mess to be on my face, which is also part of my personality. People who know me know if I'm happy, you're going to know. And if I'm miserable, you're going to know. And I will warn people. I've done this in my church before, where I'm like, don't comment on my face. Don't comment on my face for the next month. Don't comment on my face. And they don't. And so it was May of 2008 was a really, really dark, messy time. But I kept going, and I didn't really care what that looked like. And I'm grateful. So I would encourage other families who are facing a similar or different experience to recognize that you can go into the world a hot mess. It is perfectly okay to look like shit. If you are getting done what needs to be done on behalf of your child, then there is an army of people you will never meet, but who support you.
So true. And I know that everyone goes through hard stuff like this, but at what point when you look back, could you say, like, that is when I became just so strong? And I was like, and you're strong throughout the whole thing, even when you're a hot mess. But at what point were the up moments, did they outnumber the low moments?
Yeah. I'm grateful that it actually happened pretty early on. So when Bridget was identified with hearing loss, she was 2.5. So she was eligible for early intervention. But at age 3, and I mean literally the day the child turns 3, they're no longer eligible for early intervention, and they then have to go to Part B services, which is through your local school system, special education department. There is so much I have learned, by the way, over the last 12 years. And so I talked to my early intervention provider and I said, I'm really nervous. I'm really worried. How are we going to get the same level of support we've gotten from you for the last, 6 months from our school system? And, I know the school system is less likely to want to be as generous, right? And so she said, do as much research as you can and go into that meeting prepared. And she gave me some suggestions on how I could do that. So I spent the next couple of weeks doing an enormous amount of research on specifically families who were denied Part B services and for their children with hearing loss because their children were close to the end of a school year, and citing a bunch of those cases that were litigated. And I brought with me a huge binder, a huge white binder. And at the top of the binder was my research, whatever. And so I came into that meeting, which was the transition meeting with the school system. And there were lots of people in the room. My husband will remember, he was there. And I came in and I put the binder down and I saw the faces on the people. And they basically were like, so what do you want? And I said, I want her to continue speech, language, and auditory verbal therapy through the summer. And I would like it to be a couple times a week. So in my mind, I'm thinking, God, if I could just get one day a week, that would be amazing during the summer. We could just get one. And so they, and they, whatever, and they're looking at my white binder and they said, well, during the month of the rest of June and July and part of August, we could accommodate and we could do 3 days a week, but it wouldn't be at your home school. It would be at this other school that's still in the area. I'd say, okay. And so would that meet your satisfaction until we can get back together in September when the school is, in full swing or whatever? And I said, that will be satisfactory. Thank you. Inside, I'm like, oh my God! Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God! So I didn't let that show. I kind of kept it low. My husband's looking at me like, was that a success? Was that, like, how do we do? And I came out and I'm clutching my white, because more than half of it was just blank paper. More than half of it was just blank paper. And I was afraid they were going to say, can we see your notes? But they never did. The top was like that. And then the rest of it was just blank paper.
That is a really great strategy.
Yeah. And so we got more. I was hoping 1 day a week. She ended up getting 3 days a week for the summer, which really helped a lot. I did have an opportunity to really show them the research I had done. And I think they realized I was serious. Like I am not going to leave this room without services during the summer. And what's funny is 2 years ago, I bumped into a woman who had been in that meeting, because it's like a whole bunch of people. And they're like, you're Valerie Abbott. And I'm like, yeah, this woman. And she said, do you remember me? My name is Nancy. She was the audiologist for the county at the time. And I said, yeah. She goes, do you still carry around your white binder?
Yes, I do. And all my notes are up to date.
She goes,
thank you very much.
Yeah. So she had retired like a couple years before. And I thought, oh my God, I haven't seen you in like 10 years. And here I am in a Panera and you notice me and you remember the white binder. So that's another point to any parents is be prepared as much as you can, but look like you're way, way, way over prepared. That would be, yeah.
Yeah, good. So I want to leave time for questions. I want to ask you a few more questions.
Yeah.
And then if there are any questions, Leah, that we could pull up. And of course, the important poll about the dresses and the heels. Very, very important. So Val, I want to ask you 3 more questions, and then we'll move to audience questions. So I want to ask you a question about Hollins. Your love for Hollins. You wear it on your sleeves like a spaghetti stain from a Michelin 3-star restaurant. Like
absolutely, I love that.
Crazy
yes,
obvious. Crazy obvious. Talk just very briefly, if you could, your 4 years at Hollins. What did that mean to you and for your life?
Hollins changed everything. It changed what I understood the definition to be of friendship. It changed my understanding of how women are called to be supportive of one another and what that actually looks like. It changed how I viewed success and failure and how I responded to other people's success and failure. Hollins changed everything. and continues to change. For me, continues to be something that changes, is still very much a part of me and changes things over time. It is not 4 years. It continues on. The change within me continues.
Well said. All right, second to last question from me. Over the past year, people have talked about something they've done that they never did before the pandemic, or they started doing again or whatever. What was that thing for you?
2 things. One of them, I started drinking Prosecco. I highly recommend it. The second is when I was in high school, I went on a trip abroad. I went to Italy, and I got very, very sick. Very sick, and I was in the hospital for a while. And I kept a diary while I was there. This was in 1987, I think, 1988. And so during COVID, I pulled that diary out, and it was a full diary because there was no TV, no radio, nothing. So all I could do all day long for weeks at a time was write. And so I started to write those journal entries on my blog. And it's just one big diary entry called 17. And that had been on my list for years to take those journal entries and then also incorporate what I remember that's not in there, and to kind of put the two together before I'm dead. And so I've done most of it. There's a couple entries I haven't quite gotten to the end, but that is a big thing. That was a big thing I did in COVID.
All right, last question from me. What was the last book that you read?
All the Light You Cannot See. Is that what it's called? Yes, All the Light We Cannot See, which is a really long book, by the way. And it was amazing. I didn't like the end, but the rest of it was really, really great. Yes.
I agree. Fantastic book. Fantastic book. So thank you for answering all those questions.
And asking them.
Leah, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. Mary Allison had a question. I will, of course, read your book now, but because I haven't read it yet, who's your intended audience for this book? Is it a children's book as well as a book for your parents, or is it intended primarily for parents?
Great question. It is a children's book that is actually for the parents in disguise. So parents are going to read this, right? The children are too young. The parents are going to read this, and they are actually the beneficiaries of the story. So it's a little sneaky that way, but that's intentional.
And where can people buy your book?
You will never guess. So yes, it's on Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Books A Million, but it's in Target, people. It's in Target.
Target.
Well, but however you pronounce it, the fact that it is, if you go to Target and you want to order like mascara and shampoo, you can also order Pet a Pillow, and boop, it all comes to your house.
Leah, I had to interject and put that in there. We can go on to the next question.
I appreciate it. How can we get you on the Today Show?
I know, right? I really want to be on the Today Show. I don't know how to get on the Today Show, but if anybody has any connections, which by the way, I was on CBS 6 here in Richmond this week, and I think my husband put the link in there.
Yes, he did.
But you have to see it. It is, I think I did a pretty good job. I think
she was on fire.
I was on fire. This girl is on fire. Yeah. So if someone can connect me with the Today Show or with Hoda or really anybody, I'll talk to anybody.
With another question here, tell me more about the accolades and endorsements you've received for your book, A General Response, since its release.
Yes. Some of them are in the book. Some of them are in the book, including the Learn the Signs, Act Early Ambassador for Virginia, and that is a CDC program. So I'm able to say that someone from the CDC has approved it, and they've given me permission to use their logo. The Olive Osmond Hearing Fund and Justin Osmond, that is another organization that has fully supported my book, and their logo's back here. Justin and I have a cell phone. We're texting all the time. I kid you not. I'd show you if I could find my phone.
But for people who don't know, that related to Donnie and Marie Osmond.
Yes, yes.
Of the Donnie and Marie show.
Donnie and Marie, right. The Osmond family, yes. Merrill Osmond, who was the senior member and the lead singer, his son Justin and I are, I guess. And I will tell you that connection happened as a result of Katie DeBrook, who connected me because she got a book signed by him at some conference she was at, and she was talking about me and talking about Bridie, and she got the book. And so I give credit to Katie for that. Yeah, there's a bunch of people. There's the CARE Project. Some of these, if you're not involved in this planet that I live on, you wouldn't know, but some senior people in some really big organizations really love it and are endorsing it. So that's good.
Leah, I see a question that I'm totally into. You had a Hollins intern. Thank you. How did she help you in this process?
Oh my God, is Carly on? Carly, oh my God, she was a lifesaver. First of all, thank you, Hollins, for letting me have an intern this January. Because under normal circumstances, pre-COVID, like this type of a setup would not have been kosher, right? Because, you know, an unpublished author and, you know, working from home and all this stuff. And they said, no, you know, COVID rules were being a little more relaxed. And she was amazing. She worked literally 40 hours a week. She did a ton of research for me. She cleaned up my website. She, one of the things she did was she went through and looked at book competitions, like award programs, and found which ones Patapilla would best be suited for, and then put together a spreadsheet so that all I have to do is check the spreadsheet every couple of weeks to say, oh, that it's time to submit for that one. Hello, and all the rules and everything. She did a lot of copywriting and proofreading, and let me talk like this a lot to get it out of my system. So she was really amazing, absolutely amazing. If she's an example of what Hollins is putting out there, everybody needs to like ring the doorbell of the Career Center and ask for one because they're amazing.
All right, and I'm seeing a lot of talk here about Dress A.
Which one is that?
That's the one on your left. Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a couple of people, and you know, there are people who said, wear whatever makes you feel the best, which is unclear at the moment. And then someone wanted you to do a wardrobe change during this interview, which I just saw, which, you know, had I known that at the beginning.
We could have planned for that. We could have.
Any other questions coming in, Leah?
Yes, there was one more question. What would you say to your Hollins College self?
You know what? I don't know that I would say anything to my Hollins College self, because I think my Hollins College self would not have, I mean, my life is so different than what I envisioned it would be. It's so different. And I don't think my Hollins College self would have accepted that. I think that would have been a terrifying prediction. And so I think what I might say to myself is, no matter where you end up, you're going to be fine. No matter where you end up, you're going to be fine. Just keep walking.
Let's put the question another way. What are some things, one or two things maybe, that you would tell students today or incoming students? By the way, everyone must know this. Your daughter is going to be a freshman in the fall at Hollins.
Is she watching this?
I don't know.
I don't want her to necessarily hear my enthusiasm, but we are a very excited family, and she is very excited to start in September, and she is going to create her own Hollins experience, and I am so excited to watch and see what that looks like. I'm so excited. Yes, that's big news.
That is big news. That is big news. Leah, anything else?
Yeah, just one quick question. The request to see, I think, a better view of your earrings.
Oh, yes.
So some of you, so some of you know that Sindhu and I have this thing about whether or not to wear big dangly earrings when you're on something like this, and there's different trains of thought. So today I went with
Bold.
me.
Very
Go big
bold.
or go home. Go big or go home.
Go big or go home. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Val, I mean, if there are no more questions, thank you so much. And I know I've said this a million times, but I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
And I think it's just, it's great to see that success happens in different ways at different points in your life, and that things like this that you just were not expecting. And I mean, look at you shine. This is incredible. And I'm so proud of you.
Well, all of you, I am seeing your faces and your names and your comments. It's just, I'm just blown away, and I am so incredibly grateful for your enthusiasm. This is a grassroots effort, right? This is not a story for every single family, although some people have told me it is, but anything that you can do to help me spread the word about Pat-a-Pillow and about late onset hearing loss and the importance of finding these children sooner and supporting these families during their journey. I would be forever grateful for anything that you can do to help. So, but seeing everybody, this was fun. Thank you, Hollins, for offering to do this for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to say in closing, unless there's any other questions, thank you, Sindhu, Val, Leah, Alumni Relations, Rosalind, of course, the mastermind behind all of this. I'm simply a messenger, but it was a great conversation, and I have learned so much from it. I'm sure everyone else here has too. I can't wait to see, where this book takes you. It takes so many other people who I think would benefit greatly from the story. Awesome. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. But I guess everybody, thank you again for coming. Again, great conversations. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, your weekend, and you can actually purchase Val's book at the places we've listed, including Target or Target, depending on how you like to pronounce it.
I know, right?
But all the success in the world to you. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.